It started like any other quiet morning. People around the world were going about their usual routines, making breakfast, going to work, checking their phones. But then, without warning, everything stopped. Every phone screen, television, and radio went silent. The internet froze. Even airplanes mid-air reported their navigation systems had gone blank for exactly 1 minute. No one knew what was happening. Some thought it was a power grid failure. Others feared a major cyber attack. But it was something no one could have imagined. After 60 long seconds of complete silence, all the screens across the world turned back on, displaying one message in bold white letters on a black background. It read, "Stop attacking or we stop acting courteous." There was no symbol, no signature, no source, just that one strange sentence. People froze as they read it. In living rooms, cafes, classrooms, and city squares, the same confused expression spread across every face. The first reaction everywhere was disbelief. Some laughed nervously, saying it must be a prank by hackers. Others looked scared, whispering that maybe it was a warning from some country preparing for war. But within minutes, the news channels began to broadcast live coverage, and the seriousness of the situation became clear. Governments across the world held emergency meetings. Military forces went on high alert. Scientists and cybersecurity experts were called in to trace where the message came from. It didn't come from any known country, server, or satellite. It came from somewhere above the Earth, outside the reach of human technology. In one of the communication research centers, a scientist named Dr. Leon sat silently, replaying the transmission over and over. While others shouted about the need for security or retaliation, she was staring at the pattern of the signal itself. It wasn't random. The message was perfectly synchronized across every frequency, every language interface, every digital device that could display text. That kind of coordination was impossible, even for the most advanced networks. Someone, or something, had made sure the message reached every human at the same time. While political leaders tried to control the panic, social media exploded. Hashtags like "Our Last Warning" and "Our Global Message" started trending. People around the world began to argue about what it meant. Some said it was a threat from another country. Others joked that aliens had finally gotten tired of watching humans fight. Conspiracy theories multiplied faster than anyone could keep track of. But Dr. Leon noticed something different about the message. The word "courteous" stood out. Whoever wrote it didn't say, "We will destroy you," or "We will attack." Instead, they said they would stop being courteous, as if they had already been polite or patient with humans. It wasn't a declaration of war. It sounded disappointed, as if someone who had been trying to be kind was finally losing patience. By the second day, fear started to spread in every city. Stock markets crashed. People rushed to buy supplies. Governments began shutting down space programs temporarily, fearing that the signal might be connected to something orbiting the planet. At night, crowds gathered in open spaces, staring up at the stars as if expecting an answer. In a secure global meeting, the world's top leaders appeared on a live broadcast. They spoke of unity, peace, and caution. But behind the polished speeches, everyone could see the nervousness in their eyes. No one had any clue who or what had sent that message. Back in her lab, Dr. Leon continued her research with a small international team of scientists. They compared the signal with past space recordings and found something unbelievable. The frequency used in the transmission was almost identical to a faint radio pattern detected 20 years earlier, one that NASA had logged as a non-human origin, but had buried in a confidential report. That old signal came from beyond the moon. The realization sent chills through the entire lab. The message wasn't from Earth. Someone had been watching humanity for decades, maybe centuries, and had finally decided to speak. But why now? As days passed, the message replayed once every 24 hours, exactly at midnight according to Earth's coordinated time. Always the same words, no additions, no explanations. Just that simple but heavy warning. Governments tried blocking the message, but it always found its way back. Even private offline devices began displaying it as soon as they reconnected to power. The world had never felt smaller or more fragile. Dr. Leon started noticing strange coincidences. Satellite imagery showed an object just beyond lunar orbit that wasn't listed in any catalog. It wasn't large, but it emitted small bursts of energy every time the message replayed on Earth. She tried to alert the authorities, but most dismissed it as a sensor glitch. They didn't want to believe what was becoming obvious, that the message had come from somewhere intelligent. In public, life began to change. News channels started dedicating full programs to discuss Earth's last warning. Religious leaders called it a divine message. Scientists called for rational study. Some people started forming peace movements, urging governments to end conflicts, fearing that continued violence would trigger something worse. But others ignored the warning completely, saying humanity had faced countless crises before and survived. The world stood divided between fear and denial. One evening, Dr. Leon sat in her office replaying the original signal yet again. She slowed it down to analyze the sound waves beneath the message. There, hidden under the main transmission, she found a repeating pattern. Soft, rhythmic pulses, almost like a heartbeat. It wasn't random noise. It was deliberate. Each pulse followed a mathematical sequence too perfect for coincidence. That was the proof she needed. Whoever sent the message wasn't trying to harm humanity. They were trying to communicate something deeper, something emotional. The next morning, she presented her findings to the International Research Committee. "This is not a threat," she said calmly. "It's a warning, but not out of anger. The message sounds like someone who has been patient with us for a long time. They're telling us to stop. Not because they want to attack, but because they don't want to." Her words made many in the room uncomfortable. No one wanted to think about what it meant for humans to be the ones being warned, not the ones giving the warning. That night, for the first time since the message appeared, the sky above the Pacific Ocean glowed faintly blue. Pilots reported seeing strange lights moving slowly across the upper atmosphere, silent and organized, like a fleet of small stars. Cameras captured blurry footage, but nothing clear enough to confirm. Still, it was enough to convince the world that something intelligent was indeed out there, and it was watching. Fear and curiosity mixed together. Some people went outside just to stare at the night sky, whispering apologies to the unknown watchers. Others stayed inside, shutting off their devices in fear that another message would appear. Dr. Leon felt both hope and dread. She knew the visitors could easily destroy Earth if they wanted to, but they hadn't. They had chosen to communicate instead. That alone meant something. It meant there was still a chance for humanity to change. Over the next few days, small groups of scientists, philosophers, and diplomats began meeting privately. They agreed that if the message truly came from another civilization, humanity had to respond, peacefully, respectfully, and with honesty. But before they could decide how, another strange event happened. Around the world, weather satellites began showing data errors. Not malfunction, but something subtle. Readings of temperature and radiation patterns that formed geometric shapes in the atmosphere. It was as if someone was trying to draw messages using the clouds and winds themselves. The patterns looked like words, but no human language. The global community realized it was a continuation of the first warning, a demonstration of control but still without harm. People started realizing how small humanity really was. For all their weapons, wealth, and technology, they couldn't even send a message to the stars that powerful. Whoever these watchers were, they didn't want war. They wanted understanding, or obedience. Dr. Leon wrote in her personal notes that night, "The tone is not one of power, but of disappointment. Maybe they once believed in us." The world waited. Every nation, every person, every child who saw that simple message on their screens felt the same question in their hearts. What happens if we don't listen? The tension spread like electricity through every city and home. Some people said this was humanity's final test. Others said it was a chance for redemption. The words "stop attacking" didn't only mean wars. They could also mean the way people treat each other, the greed, the hate, the endless conflicts for power and profit. Maybe the message wasn't just for governments. Maybe it was for everyone. Days turned into weeks and the message stopped appearing. The silence that followed felt even heavier. People wondered if the watchers were waiting for Earth's response or preparing to act. No one knew. But in that silence, for the first time in history, something strange happened. World leaders began talking to each other directly, not through threats but through cooperation. Ordinary people became kinder. Families gathered again instead of arguing. The fear had changed something deep inside humanity. Even if no one understood exactly what courteous meant to the watchers, they understood it to mean something humans had been forgetting: respect. And somewhere far beyond the clouds, the faint blue glow above the Pacific flickered once more, as if the watchers were still there, waiting to see what humanity would do next. The message had stopped appearing, but its echo was still alive in every human mind. Weeks had passed since that strange day, yet no one had forgotten those words. Governments still held secret meetings. News stations still ran special reports every night. But the most restless people were the scientists, especially Dr. Leon and her small team. They couldn't stop thinking about the signal. It wasn't just a message. It was a voice that came from the stars, and they wanted to know who had spoken it. Her team worked from a quiet research facility near the mountains, far from city noise and signal interference. Every night they sat around glowing computer screens, tracing small fragments of data that had been captured during the global blackout. At first, all they found were random patterns, but after days of analysis, they noticed something extraordinary. The source of the transmission wasn't stationary. It had come from something moving slowly around the moon's orbit. Dr. Leon leaned closer to the screen, her eyes following the faint trail of numbers that appeared like breadcrumbs in the darkness. "It's not a satellite," she whispered. "At least not one we launched." The object's path didn't match any known space agency record. It was just there, silent, watching. She sent the data to several international observatories, but most refused to believe her findings. They said it could be an old satellite fragment or a reflection. Still, she couldn't ignore what she saw. Every time the object's position shifted, small radio pulses appeared, faint, rhythmic, and deliberate. It was like a heartbeat in space. A few days later, her team discovered something even stranger. The rhythm of those signals matched an ancient code pattern, one used in early human communication systems decades ago, but reversed. Whoever sent that message knew how humans thought and communicated. It wasn't random. It was customized for Earth. News of Dr. Leon's findings quietly reached the United Nations. Soon she was invited to join a special group of scientists and diplomats. They called it the Global Contact Committee. It was a collection of experts from different nations who would analyze any further transmissions. They met secretly, away from cameras, knowing how quickly panic could spread again. In their first meeting, one of the officials asked the question everyone was afraid to say out loud. If this message came from outside Earth, why now? Why did they wait until this point in our history? The room went silent. Dr. Leon spoke softly. Maybe they were watching us all along. Maybe they believed we could do better. But now they see we're repeating the same mistakes. No one argued. Everyone in that room knew the truth. Humanity was struggling. Wars might have slowed after the warning, but they hadn't stopped completely. Tension still existed. People still fought, still blamed, still divided themselves. Perhaps that was the real reason behind the message. Meanwhile, space agencies began to focus their telescopes toward the area behind the moon. And there it was. A small, metallic shape reflecting faint sunlight. It was the size of a passenger plane, but moved with precision no human satellite ever could. When experts tried to lock onto it with radar, it vanished from detection for hours, then reappeared as if nothing had happened. It wasn't hiding. It was observing. The discovery couldn't stay secret for long. Within days, leaked images appeared online. People began calling it the Watcher. Some believed it was an alien probe. Others said it was a warning device left by an ancient civilization. Theories flooded the internet again and fear started to grow. But Dr. Leon didn't see it that way. She believed the Watcher was a messenger, not a weapon. She noticed something the others ignored. The signals it sent were not harmful or coded with hostility. They had a calm rhythm, almost like music. When converted to audio waves, they sounded soft, peaceful, and oddly familiar, as if designed to calm whoever listened. As she studied the signal deeper, she found a pattern repeating every 7 hours. It wasn't random. It was a mathematical sequence that matched the shape of Earth's magnetic field. That meant whoever sent it had detailed knowledge of Earth's structure, atmosphere, and even human technology. They knew exactly how to reach every part of the planet at once. One evening, while reviewing her notes, Dr. Leon received an encrypted message from an old colleague working in an archive department. It contained scanned copies of government files dated over 50 years old. These files had been labeled Confidential Cosmic Echo. Inside were transcripts of several strange radio signals received by space agencies in the 1970s. They were short, almost unnoticeable, but contained similar energy signatures to the current message. The files included a chilling note from one of the early scientists. The sender repeats their call every few decades. "We are being monitored for progress." Dr. Leon sat frozen as she read it. This wasn't the first time they had spoken. Humanity had been receiving these signals for generations, each time ignored, hidden, or forgotten. Maybe the Watchers had been giving warnings all along, hoping humans would eventually mature enough to understand. She shared the findings with her team, and they began decoding the old messages. Piece by piece, a story started to form. The Watchers had once believed Earth was a growing world of promise. They had seen humans learn, create, and explore, but as centuries passed, they saw violence, destruction, and greed spreading instead. The Watchers had waited, staying silent, giving humanity chance after chance. And now, after so many years, patience was fading. The team stayed up all night in disbelief. The next morning, one of the engineers asked, "If they've been here this long, why haven't they just left us?" Dr. Leon replied, "Maybe they care more than we think." Across the planet, people were starting to sense the same truth. Farmers, students, scientists, even children, all looked at the night sky differently. The old question of "are we alone?" didn't seem so important anymore. The new question was, why did they choose to talk to us? Days turned into weeks again, and tension grew once more. Some countries began blaming each other, claiming someone might have created the message to cause global panic. Others accused space agencies of hiding information. News anchors argued on live TV. People who had started believing in peace after the warning began losing hope again. Humanity was slipping back into its old habits, forgetting the fear that had united them for a short time. Then, something unexpected happened. Every global satellite in low orbit went dark for exactly 3 seconds. No explosions, no damage, just silence. And when they came back online, one new image appeared on every government monitoring screen. It was an image of Earth taken from space with glowing words written over it in the same bright white light. "Your actions speak louder than your signals." The meaning was simple. The Watchers were reminding humanity that words and promises weren't enough. They were watching what humans did, not what they said. The world reacted with shock. But this time no one laughed. Everyone understood what it meant. It wasn't an attack. It was a lesson. A quiet warning. After that incident, the Global Contact Committee held its biggest emergency session yet. There were no arguments this time, only fear and curiosity. Dr. Leon stood before the panel, pointing to the image of Earth projected on the wall. "They're not threatening us," she said. "They're giving us another chance to prove ourselves. But I don't think we'll get many more." A quiet agreement filled the room. The committee decided to send a peaceful response, not from one country but from the entire planet. For the first time in human history, every major space agency agreed to cooperate. Scientists from different nations sat together, designing a universal reply using mathematics, sound, and emotion, the only languages that could reach across galaxies. The message they prepared was simple. "We hear you. We want to learn. We want peace." They transmitted it through every radio telescope on Earth, combining thousands of signals into one unified beam aimed toward the same region where the Watcher orbited. For several hours they waited, holding their breath. But there was no answer. Only the deep, endless silence of space. People started losing hope again, thinking the Watchers had left or given up. But just before dawn, the global monitoring stations picked up a faint response. It wasn't text this time. It was a sound. A soft tone that rose and fell like a heartbeat. It lasted exactly 1 minute, the same length of time as the first global blackout. Then it faded away. Dr. Leon closed her eyes, listening carefully. The sound carried no anger, no threat. It sounded almost relieved, as if someone out there had finally heard what they wanted to hear. Across the world, people woke up to headlines announcing the possible first peaceful contact in human history. For the first time in months, people smiled at each other again. The fear slowly turned into hope, yet deep inside, Dr. Leon knew it wasn't over. The Watchers hadn't spoken their last words. The first message was still true. Earth's warning had only begun. Humanity had been given a chance to change, but whether it would take that chance or waste it was something only time could tell. That night she stood outside the facility, looking up at the faint silver moon. Somewhere beyond it, she knew, the Watcher was still there, silent, patient, waiting for humanity's next move. Weeks turned into months after the world sent its message of peace. For a while, it felt like humanity had finally learned something. News channels spoke about unity, schools held lessons about kindness and cooperation, and social media was filled with messages of hope. People looked at the night sky with less fear and more curiosity. Everyone believed that the mysterious watchers had heard the Earth's apology and decided to forgive. But the calm didn't last forever. As time passed and no further message came from space, the excitement slowly faded. Governments returned to their old concerns: borders, politics, power. Military tests resumed quietly in remote areas hidden from the public eye. Countries began to rebuild the weapons they had paused developing months ago, just in case. Some leaders believed that the warning was nothing more than an elaborate trick by another nation to force global fear. Others thought the Watchers might never return again. Humanity, it seemed, had a short memory. Dr. Leon and her team continued to monitor the skies. Every night they listened to the same silent frequencies, hoping to catch even a faint echo of the Watcher's tone. But there was nothing, no signal, no message, not even background interference. It was as if space had gone completely still. That silence began to worry her. She knew deep down that silence didn't always mean peace. Sometimes it meant waiting. One evening, while she was reviewing the latest satellite data, her assistant rushed in holding a small device with trembling hands. "You need to see this," he said. On the screen was a list of satellite feeds, each showing sudden system failures. 3 satellites that had been launched by different countries vanished from the network at the exact same time. No explosions, no debris, no warning. They were simply gone. Dr. Leon's heart sank. "It's starting," she whispered. She immediately contacted the Global Contact Committee. Within hours, the world's top experts were on a video call, staring at the same data. The loss of 3 major satellites was not an accident. The timing was too precise. And then, a few hours later, the entire world received another message. It appeared on every major broadcast, this time accompanied by a soft, humming sound that made everyone stop what they were doing. The words glowed again in that familiar white light. "We have tolerated your chaos long enough. Your actions speak louder than your promises." For a few seconds, the whole planet stood still. The same fear that had once frozen humanity months ago returned. But this time, it wasn't panic, it was realization. The Watchers had been listening and observing all along. They had seen humans go back to their old ways. The message wasn't a threat. It was disappointment written in light. World leaders scrambled to respond. Emergency meetings were held in every capital. Some called for peace. Others called for defense. Military satellites were ordered to track the unknown object near the moon, but every radar pulse sent toward it vanished before returning. It was as if space itself refused to reveal its secrets. In her lab, Dr. Leon stared at the repeating message. It played over and over every 6 hours with the same calm but firm tone. "They are not angry," she told her team. "They are giving us a final warning. They are showing us what happens when we don't listen." Around the world, people began protesting again. This time, they weren't blaming governments. They were begging them to stop whatever was happening. Huge crowds gathered outside parliaments, holding signs that read, "We heard the message and don't make them lose hope in us." But behind the public's hope, fear still lived in the rooms of power. Some leaders couldn't accept the idea that humans were being watched or judged. They thought showing strength would protect them. Within a week of the second message, a small nation carried out a test of a new missile system. It was meant as a display of defense, but it never reached the sky. The missile disappeared just seconds after launch, as if swallowed by thin air. Not a sound, not a flash, just gone. After that, the world finally understood. The Watchers didn't need to destroy anything to send a message. They could erase technology without harm, without violence. It was power beyond anything humanity had ever known. The Global Contact Committee decided to send one more transmission, this time not to explain or defend, but to ask for guidance. The message was simple. "We hear your warning. Help us understand what we must do." For several days, there was no answer. The world held its breath. People barely slept. Every time the wind blew or the lights flickered, people wondered if it was another sign. Then one night, a faint beam of blue light appeared over the ocean. It wasn't bright or frightening, just soft, like moonlight on water. Satellites detected a signal coming from the same area. the watchers had responded. This time, instead of words, an image appeared across several broadcast networks simultaneously. It showed the planet Earth surrounded by circles of light, each one representing energy, balance, and peace. Then the image changed, showing the same Earth surrounded by dark clouds of red and black, representing conflict, pollution, and destruction. It was a comparison, a lesson. The message wasn't spoken, but everyone understood. Humanity was being shown a choice, a world of peace or a world of chaos. Dr. Leon stood in front of her team as the images looped again and again. "They're showing us what we've become," she said softly. "They're asking us which future we choose." The next morning, newspapers around the world printed the same headline. "The Watchers have spoken again." Religious groups called it divine. Scientists called it a cosmic warning. Artists painted murals of glowing blue circles on city walls symbolizing harmony. It became a global symbol of hope and fear combined. But as much as the public wanted peace, not everyone was ready to surrender pride. Some leaders refused to believe they should listen to beings they couldn't even see. One of them said during a press meeting, "No one rules Earth but humans." The statement spread everywhere, and though many disagreed, the damage was done. Humanity's unity was already cracking. That night, as Dr. Leon looked out the window of her lab, the sky seemed different. The stars appeared dimmer, as if something unseen was blocking their light. She turned on her receiver, scanning frequencies, and there it was again, the soft heartbeat-like tone from space. Only this time it was slower, almost sad. She closed her eyes and whispered, "They're giving up on us." The next morning, without warning, every electric billboard in the world lit up with a single line of text. "This is your last chance to act with understanding." No one could trace how it appeared. Even disconnected power grids displayed the same message. From that moment, a wave of quiet spread across the planet. Factories slowed down, wars paused, and leaders began to meet in person rather than argue through screens. Something inside humanity began to change, not out of fear, but realization. Dr. Leon became a quiet voice of reason. In interviews, she said, "They are not punishing us. They are teaching us. They believe we can do better. That's why they haven't left." For the first time, people truly began listening, not to their leaders, but to their own conscience. Neighbors helped each other. People apologized to strangers. Countries sent aid without asking for anything in return. The world wasn't perfect, but it was beginning to heal. Still, Dr. Leon knew that true change took more than a few kind gestures. Humanity had been warned twice now. The Watchers wouldn't keep waiting forever. Late one night, while reviewing the latest data, she noticed something new in the signal. A faint pattern that repeated every few minutes. It looked like a countdown. She didn't want to believe it, but the numbers were clear. Something was approaching. She stared at the blinking digits, realizing that whatever was coming next would decide everything. The Watcher's final judgment or humanity's redemption. Outside, the blue glow returned to the horizon, brighter than ever before. The world looked up once more, holding its breath, knowing the real test was about to begin. The countdown that Dr. Leon had discovered continued for weeks. Each day the pattern in the signal grew clearer, and experts from all over the world confirmed her findings. Something was approaching, but no one knew what. There were no threats, no demands, only a steady rhythm pulsing through every frequency, almost like a slow heartbeat. It was as if the Watchers were waiting for humanity to prepare itself. People across the planet were divided. Some believed the Watchers would come in peace. Others feared this was the end. Religious leaders prayed. Scientists calculated. Governments argued. But for the first time, humanity agreed on one thing. No one was in control anymore. Whatever was about to happen was beyond human power. As the days passed, strange signs began appearing in the sky. Lights that looked like falling stars but moved in patterns no meteor ever could. Silent streaks of blue and white gliding across the atmosphere, forming shapes that looked like circles and spirals. People stood on rooftops at night, recording them on their phones, whispering in awe and fear. Dr. Leon and her team didn't sleep much. They worked nonstop, analyzing every bit of data. On the seventh night, the signals suddenly stopped. For the first time in months, the airwaves were silent, completely silent. The countdown had ended, and then it happened. At exactly midnight, the sky over the United Nations building glowed with a faint golden light. At first, people thought it was a reflection, maybe from aircraft. But within moments, the light grew stronger, shaping itself into a figure. Not solid, not human, but something made of pure energy. The figure hovered above the building, tall and graceful, surrounded by a soft hum that could be felt more than heard. The world watched live as the image became clearer. Its face wasn't threatening or strange, it was calm, almost kind. The eyes glowed like distant stars, and when it spoke, the voice echoed gently through every speaker, every radio, every phone. "We have guided you quietly," it said. "We have watched you rise, fall, and rise again. We believed in your potential to build, to care, to protect, but your world trembles under the weight of your own choices." People all around the world listened in silence. The voice didn't sound angry or robotic. It sounded almost sorrowful, like a teacher disappointed in a student they still cared for. Dr. Leon stood among a group of scientists inside the United Nations building, watching the holographic figure through the tall glass windows. Her heart pounded as she whispered, "It's real. They're here," the voice continued. "We once walked among your ancestors. We shared wisdom, science, and hope. But over time, your kind chose conflict over harmony. We waited, thinking you would learn. We remained courteous, believing that patience would lead to peace. But you kept hurting one another, and your home began to fade." The image shifted, showing pictures of Earth from above, forests shrinking, oceans darkening, cities covered in haze. The voice grew quieter. "You are destroying the very world that keeps you alive." Tears filled Dr. Leon's eyes. Around her, even the most powerful leaders sat speechless. No one had expected the watchers to speak with such emotion. The figure continued, "We will not force you. We will not control you. We offer you one final chance to show that you can care for one another and your planet without being told to. If you can live with understanding, we will leave you in peace. If not, we will no longer intervene." Then, as softly as it had appeared, the golden light faded away, leaving the night sky dark and silent again. The broadcast had lasted only 8 minutes, but it changed everything. For days, the world buzzed with reactions. Some people felt inspired, ready to do better. Others refused to believe what they saw. Governments released statements promising cooperation, declaring it a new chapter for humanity. For the first time, countries shared resources, scientists worked together, and ordinary people began cleaning parks, planting trees, and helping neighbors. It felt like a wave of hope had swept across the world. Dr. Leon was invited to speak on global broadcasts. She told people that they didn't come to rule us. They came to remind us who we are. Her words spread everywhere, giving people strength, but not everyone accepted peace so easily. A few powerful groups still whispered in secret. They believed the Watchers were trying to control humanity by fear. They began developing hidden technology, hoping to find a way to fight back if the Watchers ever returned. Dr. Leon warned the governments that this was dangerous. "They gave us a chance," she said firmly in a meeting. "If we turn it into a competition again, we'll lose everything." But her warnings didn't stop everyone. Some believed power was still the only language that mattered. Months passed, and yet the Watchers remained silent. No new signals, no more lights in the sky. Some thought they had left forever. But the world wasn't the same anymore. People began to notice small but meaningful changes. Air felt cleaner. The ocean slowly started to heal. Humanity had begun fixing its mistakes, not because it was forced to, but because it wanted to. Still, a quiet tension hung in the air. Everyone wondered if the Watchers were still watching. Some nights people claimed to see faint blue glows moving high above the clouds, but no one could prove it. One evening, Dr. Leon returned home after a long day of work. She turned on her small television to see a news report about communities around the world, coming together to rebuild cities and plant forests. People were smiling again. For a moment she felt peace, but her peace didn't last long. Later that night, her communication monitor flashed unexpectedly. It wasn't a warning, just a soft pulse, a familiar heartbeat tone. She quickly checked the readings and realized it wasn't coming from the Watchers. It was coming from the moon's surface. Something had landed there. She contacted her old team immediately, and within hours, space agencies confirmed that an unknown object had touched down in a crater on the far side of the moon. It wasn't debris. It wasn't a rock. It was something artificial, glowing faintly blue. News spread quickly, and the world once again turned its eyes to the sky. The Watchers hadn't left after all. The next day, a faint signal reached Earth. It wasn't words this time, but images, shapes of humans standing together, their hands open toward the sky. The meaning was simple: unity. The Watchers were reminding humanity that their test had just begun. Dr. Leon addressed the United Nations. Her voice was calm but firm. They're not watching for perfection. They're watching for effort. They want to see if we can stay united when no one is forcing us to. And that was the hardest part. For months, peace had seemed easy when fear was still fresh. But as time passed, old problems started to return. Small disputes, political disagreements, greed creeping back into systems. Humanity's greatest challenge wasn't surviving a threat. It was surviving its own habits. Still, small miracles began to happen. Conflicts were solved through conversation rather than weapons. Countries shared knowledge about sustainable energy. People began focusing on kindness as if it were the world's greatest currency. The Watcher's message had planted a seed in every human heart, a quiet reminder that being courteous wasn't weakness. It was strength. Every night, Dr. Leon sat by her telescope, looking at the faint blue light glowing from the moon. It didn't move, didn't flash, just watched silently. And somehow that gave her comfort. One night, as she observed, her monitor flickered again. A new message appeared on the screen, short, soft, and calm. "Your journey has begun. We are here," she smiled. It wasn't a warning. It was reassurance. The world was still learning, still flawed, still imperfect. But for the first time in history, humanity wasn't alone in its effort to do better. Somewhere beyond the stars, the Watchers were watching, not as judges, but as quiet guardians, waiting to see if humanity would finally understand what it truly meant to live with kindness. And deep down, everyone knew that this time, the future of Earth didn't depend on power or technology. It depended on something far simpler: how humans treated each other when no one was watching. Months had passed since the glowing figure appeared in the sky and delivered Earth's last warning. The message had shaken every nation, every leader, every citizen. For a time, it felt like the entire planet had woken up from a long, dangerous dream. People started working together. They helped strangers, planted trees, cleaned rivers, and built schools in places that were once forgotten. The air even began to smell fresher in cities where pollution had once been thick as smoke. But as with all things, time slowly dulled the memory. Humans were forgetful creatures. The message from the Watchers was still remembered, but not everyone felt its weight the same way anymore. Some said maybe they were never real. Others said maybe they just wanted to scare us. And slowly, the fear turned into curiosity, and curiosity turned into doubt. Dr. Leon, who had witnessed everything from the very beginning, could sense this change. She still worked late into the night, studying signals, checking the sky, and reminding her colleagues of the promise Earth had made: to live kindly, to protect, to grow together. But she could see the shift around her. Some governments began arguing again about borders and resources. News channels showed leaders pointing fingers just like before. She sat one night in her small observatory, watching the faint blue light on the moon, the same glowing object that had landed there months ago. It hadn't moved since then, but it hadn't dimmed either. It was like a silent eye watching and waiting. She whispered softly, "Please, don't let us fail again." That same week, something unexpected happened. The blue glow on the moon flickered for the first time since it appeared. The signal was weak but steady. Dr. Leon immediately contacted the United Nations Observatory Council. Within hours, a team gathered to study it. The signal repeated every 7 minutes, a slow pulse like a reminder. When decoded, the signal revealed a short, simple message: show your unity. No explanation. No threat, just those 3 words. The message spread quickly across the planet. News anchors repeated it every hour. People discussed it online. Some thought it was a test. Others dismissed it as a glitch or coincidence. But deep down, everyone remembered what the Watchers had said: that humanity's future depended on how they treated each other when no one was forcing them to. At first, small efforts began again. Neighborhoods organized community gatherings. Volunteers went out to rebuild damaged areas. Children in schools made posters that read, "We are one." Social media was filled with hope again, like the world was trying to pass a silent exam. But not everyone wanted unity. In some parts of the world, Groups began spreading rumors, claiming the Watchers wanted to control humanity. They said Earth shouldn't listen to beings that weren't even human. Fear started to creep in again, quiet but powerful. Dr. Leon tried to warn everyone. In a broadcast that reached millions, she said gently, "They didn't ask us to worship them or obey them. They asked us to care for each other. That's all." Her calm tone reminded people of the truth. For a while it worked. People listened. Then one evening a sudden flash appeared in the sky, brighter than any star. It wasn't an explosion, but a ripple of light that spread across the clouds, silent but stunning. For a few moments the world stood still. The next morning astronomers confirmed that a small object had entered Earth's atmosphere, glowing blue before vanishing. It didn't crash or burn. It simply faded away. Many believed it was a sign, a gentle reminder that the Watchers were still there, still watching. And yet, the message, "Show your unity," began to weigh on people. They wondered what it truly meant. Was it enough to just say kind words, or did they have to prove something greater? Weeks later, a massive storm struck the Pacific. It was unlike any storm recorded before. Huge waves, endless rain, and wind so strong that entire coastlines were flooded. Dozens of countries were affected. For a moment, fear returned. People panicked, thinking it might be punishment. But instead of fighting or blaming each other, something incredible happened. Nations that had once been rivals began helping one another. Ships from distant countries sailed in to rescue people. Supplies were shared freely. Ordinary citizens risked their lives to save strangers. It was chaos, but it was also beautiful. Humanity standing together when it mattered most. Dr. Leon watched the footage with tears in her eyes. "This," she whispered, "this is what they wanted to see." When the storm finally ended, millions were displaced, but something had changed. People were no longer just thinking about survival. They were thinking about compassion. Communities built shelters together, not as separate nations, but as one species, human. Then, one morning, the signal from the moon pulsed again. This time it was stronger, clearer, and longer. The same 3 words repeated once more: "Show your unity." But right after that, something new appeared on the screens, a faint image of Earth as seen from space, surrounded by hundreds of faint blue lights. The Watchers had returned not to speak but to observe. It felt like the final test had begun. The world's leaders came together in an emergency meeting. They didn't argue this time. There were no threats, no anger, only silence as they realized what it meant. The Watchers weren't looking for perfection. They wanted to see if humanity had truly learned to cooperate, not out of fear but out of love. Dr. Leon spoke softly to the council. "They're watching how we respond, not to them but to each other. This is our moment to prove we've changed." And for a while, humanity did something extraordinary. Factories were repurposed to build housing for the displaced. Food was shared across borders. Even old enemies signed peace agreements, putting aside their grudges for the sake of survival. The world didn't just rebuild. It began to heal in ways that went beyond walls and politics. Children grew up hearing stories not about war or division, but about kindness and rebuilding. Artists painted murals of unity. Musicians wrote songs about hope. The Watcher's message became part of human culture, a symbol of awakening. But the test was far from over. As years passed, new challenges arose: climate changes, economic struggles, and power shifts. Yet every time humanity faced a new problem, someone, somewhere, would whisper those 3 words again: "Show your unity." And somehow, people remembered. Dr. Leon grew older, but never stopped working. She continued teaching new generations of scientists about what had happened, the warning, the message, and the miracle of how humans had come together. One evening, as she watched the moon through her telescope, she noticed the blue light flicker softly as if it were breathing. It reminded her of the first time she saw it so many years ago. She smiled and whispered, "We're trying. We're not perfect, but we're trying." That night, as she prepared to leave her observatory, her monitor beeped once again, a soft, rhythmic tone. She froze, then looked closer. The screen displayed a new signal, not a warning this time, but a single image. Earth glowing softly in the dark, surrounded by faint golden circles. Beneath it appeared just 2 words: "Well done." her eyes filled with tears. She didn't need anyone to explain what it meant. Humanity had finally passed the test. The Watchers had seen enough. They had witnessed kindness, unity, and courage, not in a perfect world, but in one that kept trying despite every flaw. The next day, people around the globe reported seeing soft golden streaks in the night sky. The Watchers were leaving, not because they were disappointed, but because they trusted humanity to continue without them. For the first time in centuries, Earth stood on its own, not in fear but in peace. And even though the sky grew quiet again, everyone knew. The Watchers might be gone, but their message would never fade. It lived in every act of kindness, every moment of forgiveness, and every person who believed the world could be better if humans simply remembered to stay courteous, even when no one was watching. Years had passed since the golden lights appeared across the night sky and slowly drifted away, leaving humanity standing on a quiet but hopeful Earth. The Watchers had gone, or at least that's what everyone believed. The blue light on the moon had dimmed until it was no more than a pale spot, like an old scar from a story half forgotten. But their message still echoed through every heart that had truly listened. People began calling that time the Great Reminder. It wasn't remembered as an invasion or miracle, but as the moment when humanity finally faced itself and changed. The world looked different now. Not perfect, not flawless, but gentler. Skies were clearer. Rivers ran with life again. Cities were still busy, but not as cruel. People learned to pause before arguing, to think before hurting, and to forgive faster than they once did. It wasn't because of fear. It was because of understanding. Children grew up learning about kindness and respect as subjects as important as science or math. Schools taught that strength didn't come from weapons or wealth, but from empathy. The phrase "show your unity" became part of every nation's promise, printed on walls, spoken in songs, and whispered in quiet prayers. Dr. Leon had retired by then. Her hair had turned silver, and her hands shook when she held her telescope. But every night she still looked up at the stars from her small observatory by the coast. She didn't need awards or fame. The stars were her company. She often said softly, "We didn't just survive, we learned." One cold evening, she sat outside wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea while the waves hit the rocks below. The sky above was full of stars, brighter than she remembered. Somewhere deep inside, she wondered if the Watchers could still see her, if they still cared. As if the universe was listening, a faint shimmer appeared above the horizon. It wasn't strong or blinding, just a gentle flicker, like a heartbeat in the sky. She blinked, thinking it was her tired eyes. But then the flicker came again, this time in rhythm. 3 slow pulses, then silence, then 3 again. She rushed to her old monitor inside the observatory, turned it on, and began tracking the frequency. It was faint, so weak that most modern sensors would have ignored it. But she recognized it instantly. It was the same frequency the Watchers had once used. Her heart raced. "It can't be," she whispered. For hours she worked alone, decoding what little data she could. When the message finally took shape, her hands trembled. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a test. It was just one sentence. "You have learned courtesy. Now learn compassion." She sat in silence, staring at the words. Courtesy was what the Watchers had asked for before. Politeness, respect, peace. But compassion, that was something deeper. It wasn't just about being kind. It was about feeling what others felt. It was about connection. The next morning, she contacted the United Nations Communication Network and shared the signal. Within hours, every major observatory confirmed it. The message was real. Humanity had received its next lesson. The world didn't panic this time. There was no fear, no chaos. People were calmer now, more mature. The message spread slowly but meaningfully. It appeared on news screens, billboards, and school posters. Children painted it on classroom walls. Musicians turned it into melodies. The world understood that this was not a new threat. It was a continuation of the same story. But what did learn compassion really mean? That question sparked a new wave of reflection across the planet. In small towns, people began organizing compassion weeks, days when everyone helped someone they didn't know. In cities, groups formed to care for the lonely, the sick, and the forgotten. Technology companies began designing projects not just for profit, but for people. Things that improved lives without taking from others. Even governments began cooperating more openly, realizing that helping a neighboring country was the same as helping their own future. Dr. Leon was invited once again to speak to the world. Standing before the cameras, her voice was softer now, but clear as ever. Courtesy was about control, she said. It taught us to stop hurting each other. Compassion is about understanding. It teaches us to feel for one another. That is what they want us to learn now. Her words resonated everywhere, and slowly humanity began to live them. Over the next few years, major global projects began, not to build weapons or towers, but to restore the Earth itself. Vast green zones were planted across deserts. Old machines that had polluted the air for decades were replaced with silent, clean ones. Oceans that once choked on waste began to sparkle again. And for the first time, animals that had vanished from the wild returned to their natural homes. People began to call it the Great Healing. But the Watchers never appeared again. They sent no more messages, no lights, no signs. It was as if they had finally stepped aside, letting humanity walk on its own. Dr. Leon grew older, but she continued to teach not just science, but wisdom. Students from all over came to hear her speak about the Watchers, about that golden night, and about how one warning had reshaped an entire world. Do you think they'll ever come back? A student asked her one day. She smiled gently. Maybe they never left, she said. Maybe they live inside every act of kindness now. Her answer stayed with people for generations. It became a simple truth, that the Watchers didn't need to appear again because humanity had finally become its own guardian. Years later, when Dr. Leon passed away peacefully in her sleep, the world mourned her not as a scientist, but as a bridge between two kinds of beings, those from Earth and those beyond it. That night, as if the universe was paying respect, the sky over the planet shimmered faintly with soft golden ripples. It lasted only a few minutes, but millions saw it. Some called it coincidence, others called it goodbye. But deep down, everyone knew it meant something. After that, the golden lights never appeared again. Yet humanity didn't need them anymore. The message had become a way of life. People still built machines, still explored space, still made mistakes, but now they did so with awareness. They understood the balance between progress and empathy. Generations passed, and one day a small group of explorers launched a mission to reach beyond the solar system. Their ship, powered by clean energy and built through the cooperation of dozens of nations, carried a message engraved on its side. We come in courtesy. We travel with compassion. It was humanity's reply to the Watchers, not through words, but through action. As the ship drifted into the quiet darkness between stars, Earth glowed behind it, peaceful, blue, and alive. The world had finally learned what the Watchers had tried to teach all along, that the true power of a civilization wasn't in how far it could reach, but in how deeply it could care. And somewhere in that endless space, perhaps among unseen stars, the Watchers watched again. Silent, proud and content, humanity had grown. It had learned. It had transformed from a world that once needed warnings into one that lived by understanding. The old phrase returned once more, whispered in every home and every heart, not as fear, but as wisdom. Stop attacking, or we stop acting courteous. But now, it carried a new meaning, not just for the galaxy, but for the humans themselves. It wasn't a threat anymore. It was a reminder, a quiet promise that as long as kindness guided them, the light of humanity would never fade again. And so, Earth continued its journey, small in the vastness of space, but brighter than ever, not because of its technology or might, but because its people had finally learned what it truly meant to be human.